I'm running into a bit of an issue of the introductions to the gospel, comparing the beginning of John to the beginning of Luke. As I said before, I want the beginning of John to be the introduction, because that's more general, it's more broad. But I don't know where to stop during John's introduction. It flows so seamlessly into the beginning of John's ministry. And somewhere in there I need to stick in the entire beginning of Luke, which is John's parents' meeting of the angel, telling them, you will have a child, you will name him John, and then John's birth. I'm trying to think now, where would that best fit? I could put it right after that first paragraph that begins, in the beginning was the Word was with God. That first paragraph ends with verse 5, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Because the next paragraph would begin with, there was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light. I don't know if I should put in the entire history of John and then say, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. I guess I could, but it would seem out of place, because it would be as if I just ignored the entire history that was just read and then said, okay, this is John's parents, this is John's birth. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. It seems more like that introductory verse, there was a man sent from God, his name was John, should come first, and then there should be like a flashback to John's parents, the meeting of the angel, John's birth, and then moving into Jesus' birth. I think that's what I'm going to do, but now I got to figure out where, after the introduction of John, I should put the flashback. That's what it's going to be. Yeah, it's got to be a flashback. And we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. I'm thinking maybe after that I can go into, for as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order a declaration of these things which are most surely believed among us, even as they delivered them to us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. It seemed good to me also. Okay, that seems like a good flow. Yeah, after the explanation of the fact that the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. That's verse 14, John 1. Then, before I get into John bore witness of him and cried, this was he of whom I spoke, he that comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. That I'm going to save for after the flashback. So in between verse 14 and 15, I think is the best place to put the birth of John, and maybe even then the birth of Jesus, the whole story. And then the mention in Luke about him going to Jerusalem at a young age, and then jumping back here to John, saying, John bore witness of him and cried, this was he of whom I spoke, he that comes after me is preferred before me. Because then he goes into, no man has seen God at any time, the only begotten Son, which is the bosom of the Father, he has declared him. And this is the record of John, that the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who are you? See, he's going right into his own story. So that's where I'm going to enter the beginning of Luke. For as much which from the beginning were eyewitnesses, ministers of the word. I was thinking of not including this introduction from Luke just because it's Luke's message to Theophilus. This is what I'm doing. I realize it's definitely a good idea because he clearly said exactly what I'm trying to do, to write in order of those things. So yeah, I'm definitely keeping it. Yeah, that's a good paragraph right there. It's all one long run-on sentence, but it's all right. Luke 1 through 4. There was in the days of Elizabeth was barren. They both were well stricken in years. What I want to do is I want to do what I guess Whitaker House chose to do, which is some of the more questionable translations, just have it underlined and put another word at the end of the verse in very small letters, a more modern interpretation. So that way they're not changing the King James, but they are providing another more easily understood word for those who aren't well versed in the King James Old English. Each underlined word having its underlined explanation in the order of how they appeared in that paragraph. The course of Abaya. That's the next one. The course by a priestly division. You know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to include, as the King James Version Easy Reader does, the dictionary method of splitting up the syllables of a name, putting that big, it looks a lot like an apostrophe. It looks kind of like a quotation mark, but it's not. It's that, I don't know, someone educate me. Mark that shows emphasis has to be on that syllable. Yep, it's a different mark. What they do is that every single time a name is mentioned, it doesn't matter if it's the second time in a verse, they still break it apart into its syllables with the apostrophe, whatever hyphen, whatever that is at the emphasis. I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to have the name broken up into syllables in this manner. The very first time it's mentioned, I'm going to leave all the rest of the mentionings of that name just spelled out. And it came to pass, fear fell upon him.